All right, so this video is going to be, I don't know. Right now, your boy is heading to therapy, so mental therapy. So I grew up in the hood, like a lot of young, like a lot of African Americans, and I say a lot is probably relative, but I think the numbers probably like 80% or something like that. 70% African American people grew up in impoverished states or below the poverty line. So I grew up below the poverty line, and we already got post-traumatic slave disorder, along with working overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that. But you tack all these things on, growing up in a household without a father, yada yada yada, growing up in dysfunctional households. All of these things play a role on your mentality. You grew up, sometimes you had limited beliefs. So it's good to be able to get that weight up off of you and get clarity, because a lot of people are walking around saying that they woke, but they sleep. So thankfully, I've had a chance of working with a therapist that is woke for real, and she understands the psychological issues that African Americans go through. So she's been in the game for about 30 years, and also, so I had a female therapist, and then within the same practice, I'm now working with a brother as well, who teaches me, helping me to see within myself, so that way I can gain clarity, but also group dynamics. So we're talking about group dynamics as well. So what I find that's phenomenal with going to therapy is because therapy helps me become a better salesman, and therapy helps me sell my products better. And so I definitely would tell you to go to therapy. Go see a therapist. I knew growing up in the hood, one day I would be in therapy. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go talk to a therapist to see what's going on. Another thing too is, like, we think we know ourselves, and I was already meditating. I was already meditating and doing some of these other different things, self-care, that Black women are really pushing right now, which is phenomenal. But I was already doing these things, but so I thought that I am aware. I was aware enough that when a friend told me, hey, you need to go to therapy, at first I took offense to it, and I was like, what, she think I'm crazy? Like, I think that's everybody's first reaction. But then I reminded myself that I wanted to go to therapy anyway. And another thing that pushed me to go to therapy was watching the TV show Billions. In the first episode of Billions, I don't know if you have seen it or not, but in the very first episode, it actually opens up with a guy sitting on a therapist's couch, and the therapist and he goes in there, and basically the therapist just reminds him of how phenomenal of a guy he is, reminds him of all of his wins and all of these things. And basically he goes in, he walks off her couch, walks into the I think they call it a I don't know what a closing floor, bidding room, stock floor. I don't know what they call it, because it wasn't like because they were at I think Billions, they actually have a small firm. So I don't know what type of practice it is, but it's a financial practice, but I don't know if it's a merger and acquisition firm or something else. But anyway, he gets off of the therapist's couch, walks over next door, and closes this big deal, and does this major transaction. And he had some anxiety around that transaction. He had some fear, he had some worry, he had some doubt around doing this transaction, because millions of people's lives is on stake, and in his job. This guy probably makes probably $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year doing that type of work, maybe more. I don't know, probably $1 million a year doing that type of work in this environment. But art imitates reality. So I thought to myself, what are some of the thoughts that I have up here that are holding me back, or could be holding me back, or making me run slower when I could be running faster, because I just don't understand. I just don't understand where these thoughts are coming from, and it's not really so much the thoughts, but it's the emotions that we tie to the thoughts. Because selling products is more so about you tapping into people's emotions and then following it up with logic, with thoughts and stuff, like, with logic. You tap into the emotion, and then you follow it up with the logic. So the emotional drivers that I had within me may not have all, may have come from, the experiences that I had in life growing up in the hood, maybe some things maybe some things in the Marine Corps, maybe some things in Iraq, maybe some things in Afghanistan. Who knows? Relationships when I was with women broke up. All of these different events, causes small traumatic things that happen inside your life. If you ever saw a fight, you ever saw somebody get beat up in front of you, or whatever the case may be, you saw, an accident happen. Like, all of those different things are like small traumatic experiences. I thought trauma was like, inside the movie when you see the explosion and, everything stops and you just see the person there that's all gray because all of the soot and everything is like on their face, and they're just like, I'm thinking like that's what trauma is. But trauma is not. Trauma could be as simple as a friend of mine that I was in the Marine Corps with. This guy was born into wealth, right? And I don't even know that I can't even start giving you numbers, but this guy was born into wealth. His traumatic experience was basically being raised by the butler and the maid. Like, that was his trauma. I couldn't relate to that because I was like, you ain't really been in, I grew up in the hood. Like, that's like, I would have loved to grow up with, I would have loved to have grown up with a butler and a maid, right? But I'm looking at his world through my lens, and I'm already wrong. So the minute I start looking at trying to compare your situation to my situation, I'm already wrong, because he didn't know what it was like to grow up in the hood. He only grew up in this environment. He knew what a mother was, and he knew what a father was, and he knew that the two people that was supposed to love him was never there. So he was basically like a latchkey kid. So even though he had everything it is that he wanted, he still didn't have what he really wanted, which was the love from his mother and father. And that caused trauma in his life. I didn't know that at the time. I was in the Marine Corps. I hadn't been to therapy. But now I understand, like, okay, it doesn't have to be something crazy in order for you to need to sit down and talk to somebody. It could be just you making a transaction. It could be you starting an e-commerce business. It could be you finishing something that you're supposed to do. It could be you pressing the publish button on your Facebook ads because you have some anxiety around, is the copyright, was this the right video, is everything right on the landing page, will they like the product? Like, all of those different things are anxiety. And guess what? You can go to therapy about that. You can go talk to a therapist and say, hey, I'm starting this new business. I have some anxiety around these different things, which is, anxiety is really like fear, worry, doubt. So I have some of these emotions around it, and I don't know why, and then your therapist can talk to you about that, and remind you of the security that you have in your job, in your family, and remind you that you only need to be listening to the people that really care and is really going to support you. I'm kind of giving you some therapy right now. So those are the different reasons why we need to go to therapy. And like I just told you, I grew up in the hood, so all of that, dysfunctional family, father not being around, like all of these different things. And thankfully, I think I've been in therapy now, I'm probably moving into a year, maybe a year, some change. I think I started last year in last year in July. So yeah, so I'm at it like a year and some change now in therapy. And it was great. It was great the first day I went, and immediately I got a return on my money, because again, I'm in sales as well, right? We're as we do e-commerce, we're really in sales. So going to therapy, highlighting these emotional triggers within you will allow you to be able to highlight emotional triggers within your customer and how your customer feels about something. Today, I was showing somebody, talking about highlighting emotional triggers, or just not so much highlighting emotional triggers, but once emotions are like, once understanding or being made aware of people's emotions and how they feel and how they articulate how they feel. Like, I'm telling you this now, so that way it could be on your mind, especially if you're talking to somebody who needs your product. You can start to listen to how they're describing their pain, and what you're really listening to is emotional words, right? So today I was talking to somebody about one of the products that I sell, and the lady used the word, she used two words. One word she used was feeling like she lost her womanhood. The second word she used was embarrassment. As soon as she said those two words, I immediately wrote those two words down in my mind. And then when she left, I wrote those two words down on paper, because it lets me know, okay, these are the things that are present and at the top of mind for her, because she just spit those two things out. And immediately I grabbed them and held on to them, because I'm like, that's what's going on in her mind. So as I'm writing, or as I'm trying to translate a message, or as I'm telling the copywriter, like, hey, this is what's going on in their mind when they're going through this situation. And these are the words that they're using to describe their own problems. That's what you want to do. You don't want to never try to, if you feel that you're sitting there trying to figure something out and there's no references in front of you, remember I keep talking about research, then if you don't have words in front of you where you've done the research saying, okay, well, these people feel like this, and this, you playing yourself, so you need to go do the research and sit in front of the research, and then start writing from the research, not just writing off the top of your head, because you forget stuff and other things come up and snatch you here and there, and things pop up. So having that guide, be guided by the research and have it in front of you, and is phenomenal. So you should definitely do that. All right, I'm gonna shoot another video. Peace.